A while back, I made a video called my last trial, a day in the life of a lawyer, and for whatever the reason, it got a lot of traction, and there were a lot of questions in there that I said I would answer in a follow-up video, which I was going to start while walking home this morning from a business meeting, but on the way, I saw a sign for a blood donor clinic, which is fantastic, because I'm going to go give blood now. This is where they test for the iron, and this will give me a good 10 minutes to finish the follow-up vlog. It may be boring, but at least I'm going to get to some of those questions that were in the comment section. So, time to get ready for some bleeding. Look at those veins. Okay. This is the disinfecting process. Oh yeah. Okay, moment of truth. Okay. Not so bad. Oh yeah, that's the blood gonna go down. Oh, that's so cool. Ça vous dérangerait pas si je parle en mon appareil photo? Okay, so the first question. There is no correlation between IQ and the ability to become a lawyer. Trust me. That is barring obvious exceptions or extremes, so we don't take the extreme examples to draw generalized conclusions. Anyone who can study reasonably, focus, draft reasonably well, read well, can become a lawyer if they want to. Now, studying law, this is where it gets interesting. My first boss said he always felt that students should do their stage in Quebec or internship elsewhere before actually studying any law, because it would make it so much more efficient to study law actually having done your stage beforehand. You would know what things meant, you would know what motions meant, you'd know what briefs meant, you would know how to read case law, and you would have already had some meaningful experience before actually studying the substance of what you're going to be practicing for the rest of your life. So I do think we have it somewhat backwards a little bit in that we study law in a void, having no idea what the practice is actually about, and then by the time we get to do our stage, it's the first time 4 years later that we're actually getting a taste of the practice. Law school, you are studying the grand principles of law, and it all seems glamorous, it all seems amazing, novel, important. You study the important questions like, if a man shoots a deer and the deer dies on someone else's property, who does the deer belong to? If a neighbor's tree is slumping over the neighbor's property, who has the obligation to cut it down? What happens if one neighbor decides to cut it down while the other neighbor's out? Important questions. It's a little bit stressful. In Quebec, we have something called a civil system where we have a codified set of laws, 2,800 articles in the civil code that you have to study, memorize. It's in sections. You have to understand what applies to where. You have to know that the actual articles exist. Common law elsewhere in Canada and in the world, the law is made by judgments. So you end up studying the big judgments that make for big principles of law. It's the civil versus the common law system. How am I doing? Presque fini?
Oui.
Finished? What was my time? 6 minutes? 5.5? 5 minutes et demi? 5 minutes, 38 seconds for a pint of blood. That's a new record. No, vous inquiétez pas. That's all the bag of blood right there. So this is the 5-minute cool down period. This is not a flattering angle, but I have no choice. I've got to hold it with one hand while my other arm rests. Okay, so you finish law school, you graduate, very nice. You have to do bar school, which is the admission test to become a member of the Order of Lawyers. I'll skip that part because it's boring, painful. I said it's always like a minefield. Some people survive, some people don't. And there's really no rhyme or reason as to who passes the bar and who doesn't. You pass the bar, the next thing you're going to do is what they call in Quebec the course au stage, which is literally the race to an internship, also known as the rat race. Everyone coming out of law school is vying for a handful of positions at big firms, reputable firms, where you go through an interview process, dinners, wining, dining, blah, blah, blah. Course au stage. I think I remember the stats being something like 1% of people out of law school will get a job at a big law firm, and people who get those jobs generally take it as a very deep sense of personal satisfaction, and rightly so to some extent. I got a job at one of the biggest law firms in Canada where I did my internship and where I practiced as a lawyer for close to 5 years, all things included. What is life like as a young lawyer? If you go to a small firm or you start out on your own, there's an expression called baptism by fire, which is you learn everything on your own very quickly through trial and error. When you get into a big law firm or a reputable law firm or a good boutique litigation firm, there's very little baptism by fire because there's a reputation of a big firm at stake, and they groom you, they train you from beginning to end. It has its pros, it has its cons. I think it's a very good process because it does teach you good habits by and large. It teaches you how to research, it teaches you how to draft before you start doing it on your own, unsupervised, jumping into court feet first. There's a benefit to the flip side, jumping into court feet first, or as they say, jumping off the cliff, you have to grow your wings as you fall. I worked at a big law firm for the first 5 years of my life as a lawyer. The reality of what you do as a young lawyer, stagiaire, intern, you do a lot of research, you do a lot of drafting memos for senior partners so that they can have an expertise on any given file that they're working on. You research finer points of law, you prepare binders of authorities for judges, you do very little actual pleading on substantive contested motions, but you get to watch senior lawyers doing it, and that's how you acquire your experience. How much time do I have left here? Oh, I only have 15 seconds left. Okay, I'll have to finish this video on the way home. What is the day-to-day of a young lawyer? When you're working at a big firm, you end up working under other lawyers, more senior lawyers, partners, for them on their files, which means that you're going to end up working for multiple lawyers in multiple files, various areas, but the most important thing is you're going to be working with multiple lawyers with different schedules, and you are going to be expected to accommodate all of the schedules of all of the lawyers under whom you work. That means long days and weekends. 12-hour days, no less than a 5-day week, 6, sometimes 7-day weeks. You get emails in the morning from some of the early bird lawyers, you get emails at night from some of the lawyers who work late. It's a hectic, stressful schedule, but it's what it is. And it trains you. If you can't survive the exhaustion, then it's an indication as to what you're going to be able to do in the practice as you evolve with it. And life as a young lawyer is generally a thankless job. You quickly get used to the fact that when you do good work, the indication of that is that nobody's complaining, which means that the only feedback you tend to get is when the work is not done properly or when it's negative feedback, when people are frustrated. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with. People have sensitive egos and they like to get complimented when they do good work, but the reality is lawyers are busy, lawyers are stressed. When you do good work, they're going to use it and you're not going to hear anything from them. But if it's not the most recent case law, if it's not applicable case law, that's when you hear from them. And it's a difficult thing to deal with for some people, but you get used to it, and if you don't get used to it, that's the natural selection process. There's a lot of ego in law, and a lot of young lawyers don't really appreciate that their job is to make the senior lawyer look good, look smart, know what they're talking about, understand the subject material. There's very little glamour in the work of a young lawyer. They work in cubicles, small offices, late nights to produce the material that the senior lawyer uses, and they get to watch the senior lawyer plead in front of judges and do everything that we generally regard as glamorous about the profession, while the young lawyer who's done a ton of work sits there and watches. But that's the natural progression of what it means to be a lawyer. You can't jump in to the pool unless you've learned how to swim. And that's it. You put in your time, you do the work, you develop the skills slowly but surely. You work your way up the ladder in a big firm to partnership status, or you go in-house, or you start up on your own, like I did. And the day-to-day of the practice, litigation is a vicious practice. I think the unfortunate reality is that it's not so much a search for the truth as it is a mission to prove that you're right. But that's a video for another day. So that's that. Hope you liked it. Any more questions, post them in the comments below. I'll do my best to respond. Booyah! Peace out.